A woman in a dirt-streaked wedding dress sat sobbing on a splintered bench, mascara smeared down her cheeks, while strangers pointed, laughed, and snapped photos. Her groom had just vanished, gone without a word, leaving only a cruel message. "I can't marry a cow." Then, out of the blue, a stranger stepped from the crowd and asked her to marry him instead. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The train hissed as it slowed to a crawl, its old metal frame groaning beneath the strain of the brakes. Ethan Rowe shifted in his seat, his back stiff from too many sleepless nights in transit. He rose not out of interest, but from habit, the kind of restless movement that masks despair. Outside, a Midwestern town flickered to life under a low, gray sky. The platform was plain, wood warped by years of storms, paint chipped down to bare bone. A clock hung crooked beside a flickering bulb that hadn't seen a full glow in years. Ethan stepped off, inhaling the cool air like it might rinse his lungs of memory. But grief clung to him like sap to flannel, thick, sticky, and impossible to scrub off. A year ago, he'd laid Ruth in the earth. She'd been the one good thing in a hard life. Losing her hadn't just taken love, it had stripped him of direction. Since then, he'd roamed from town to town like a man chasing ghosts on the breeze. It was the sound that drew him, a sound that didn't belong in the dull hum of this forgotten depot. A sob, raw and unfiltered, the kind a person makes when there's no one left to hear them. He turned and spotted her. She sat hunched on a bench that sagged beneath her weight, a wedding veil limp around her shoulders, dragging on the dusty planks. Her dress, once intricate and hopeful, bore the marks of travel and despair, mud on the hem, a rip along the side seam, makeup smeared across the neckline. She might have looked like a broken relic from some ruined celebration, if not for the eyes. Wide, glassy, stunned. She wasn't crying like someone rejected. She was crying like someone erased. The people passing by didn't just ignore her, they consumed her. A businessman stared openly, then turned away in revulsion. A teenager lifted his phone, captured the image, and snickered as he walked off. Even the station master looked once and quickly disappeared inside, as if she were too much for the dignity of this broken place. Ethan's first instinct was to look away too. Something deep in him recoiled, the way society trained you to recoil from things that didn't fit, from pain made visible. But it didn't last, because his second instinct, just as quick, was shame. Ruth would have knelt beside that woman, would have asked her name, held her hand. So Ethan forced his voice to work. "Miss, are you all right?" he asked. She looked up. Her lips trembled before the words came. "My fiancé said he couldn't marry a cow." Mandy Hughes did not look up again for a long while. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floorboards beneath her battered shoes, as if some answer might rise from the cracks and make this day make sense. Ethan sat beside her, arms resting on his knees, both of them watching the world pass by as though it were some distant planet neither could return to. "My name's Mandy," she murmured eventually. Her voice was low, raw, with the kind of pain that no longer seeks sympathy, just space. He nodded. "Ethan." She gave a sad half-smile, just for a second. "I met him online. Rick. He was sweet at first. Flowers to my house. Good-night messages every night. Told me I had the kind of body that made men lose their minds. I should have known that meant nothing." Ethan stayed quiet. She didn't need questions. She needed air. "I sent him a picture in this dress," she continued, smoothing her hand over the soiled lace. "Told him it was my grandmother's. She wore it in '63. He said I'd look like an angel in it. So I saved up, took the train here like we planned. I stepped off and saw him. standing right where you were." She swallowed hard. He looked at me like I was something that had just crawled out from under a car. There was no anger in her voice. That was what hurt most. Only resignation, like she'd rehearsed this ending long before it arrived. He said I was too much, too big, too noticeable, too embarrassing. Ethan's jaw tightened. His hands clenched loosely in his lap, not out of rage, but frustration. Frustration at a world that handed out shame like spare change and taught women to accept it as part of love. "You deserve better," he said at last. She gave a hollow chuckle. "No one thinks so. I've heard the whispers in stores. I've seen the look waiters give me when I eat alone. I tried everything. Keto, fasting, starving, crying in gym parking lots. The weight never left. Neither did the stares." Her honesty was disarming, even brutal, but it never felt performative. Mandy wasn't asking for pity. She was offering truth, unwrapped, unfiltered. Ethan shook his head slowly. "He didn't leave because of your weight. He left because he didn't have the strength to stand next to someone braver than him." She blinked. "Why are you being nice to me?" He hesitated. "I'm not sure," he admitted. "Maybe because after Ruth died, I didn't think I could feel anything again. Not grief, not warmth, not a damn thing. But hearing you talk, seeing how you're still standing after that," he looked at her gently. "Maybe I just needed to meet someone, Ree." Mandy watched Ethan rise with a look that hovered somewhere between disbelief and fear. His boots thudded against the planks as he crossed the station platform toward the small glass-windowed office, the kind with a crooked sign that read, "Depot Manager." She blinked, thinking perhaps she'd misheard him. "Ethan," she called, her voice uncertain, trembling. "What are you doing?" He turned halfway, eyes steady. "Seeing if the justice of the peace still comes around here on weekends." "For what?" "If you'll let me," he said, as plainly as if asking her to dance. "I'd like to marry you. Right here. Right now." The words struck her like thunder in a dry field. Everything inside her sparked: fear, disbelief, 1,000 whispered lies about her worth rising like ash from her chest. "You're joking," she said, voice cracking. "You have to be." "I'm not." She stood slowly, uncertain if her legs would support her weight, her shame, the possibility. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Ethan said. "I know you were abandoned in your wedding dress. I know people mocked you, and you didn't run or lash out. I know you're still breathing after being gutted in front of strangers. That's not weakness. That's strength. That's heart." He stepped closer, voice low but unwavering. "And I think I'd rather build something real with someone like that than spend one more day pretending I'm alive." Mandy's lip trembled. Her mascara had long since streaked, but her eyes still held a strange, vulnerable dignity. "But I'm not," she started, perhaps about to say thin, or worthy, or enough. Ethan interrupted her with more conviction than she'd heard in years. "You're beautiful, and no one gets to tell you otherwise." The next minutes blurred into something surreal. The station master, a grizzled man named Harold, who'd once performed weddings for passing train crews, shuffled out with a leather-bound book and watery eyes. A young woman who'd been watching from afar stepped forward with a handful of daisies. "We picked them behind the fence," she explained, pressing them into Mandy's hands with a smile. Another older lady pulled off her shawl, soft blue wool, and wrapped it over Mandy's shoulders like a mantle of dignity restored. Under the cry of a distant train horn and the restless wind slicing through the trees, Ethan and Mandy stood face to face. No altar, no procession, just two souls, battered and raw, making something whole out of what was broken. A small crowd gathered, unsure whether they were witnessing a miracle or a madness. But when the vows were spoken, when Ethan promised presence instead of perfection and Mandy answered with trembling courage, a hush fell. One woman whispered, hand to her heart, "This is the most honest wedding I've ever seen." And no one disagreed. The wooden sign above the storefront creaked in the wind, heart and hearth, carved by hand, each letter smoothed by time and sun. It sat at the edge of a quiet town, nestled between a feed store and an old post office that barely handled mail anymore. The shop smelled of cinnamon, cedar shavings, and slow mornings. Inside, racks of braided bread cooled beside shelves lined with handcrafted cutting boards, rocking chairs, and wooden toys with paint worn soft by curious fingers. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Ethan could usually be found at the back, sanding the edges of a cradle or shaping maple into something that might outlive him. Mandy, apron powdered in flour, moved through the kitchen with a quiet, rhythmic grace, her laughter trailing into the front room as she handed a warm bun to a boy who came in every Saturday with exactly 3/4 in his fist. The town had come to know them not as the couple from that wedding, but as something better, as a home you could walk into. No one was judged in Heart and Hearth. Whether you were a single mother scraping together enough for a birthday cake or an ex-con looking for a stool to sit on in silence, you were welcomed the same, with warmth, with a smile, with the understanding that we all come into the world a little bruised. Years had passed since that day on the platform, but neither Ethan nor Mandy let the memory dull. It had become a kind of compass. When things got hard, and they did, because life didn't magically right itself, they remembered how it started, with a shattered woman in a torn dress and a widower who could barely feel his own heartbeat. And yet, out of those ruins, something enduring had taken root. Ethan often told the same story to curious customers, how he'd seen her crying, mascara dripping, and knew right then he was looking at the bravest soul he'd ever meet, not because she stood tall, but because she hadn't crumbled. "She didn't hide," he'd say, "not even when she had every reason to." And Mandy? She never forgot the look in Ethan's eyes when he stepped toward her that day. It wasn't pity. It wasn't obligation. It was awe. It was recognition. In a world where people either ignored her or judged her, he looked at her like she was finally enough. Their story wasn't a fairy tale, but it was a true one. And for the people who stumbled into their shop, broken in ways they didn't know how to name, that truth was enough to believe in again.